It was supposed to be just a small gathering, nothing too big, nothing too loud, just a few. Familiar faces, food, music, a bit of laughter to fill the evening hours with warmth and presence. Everyone had come in with smiles on their faces, like they were all running from the weight of something and wanted to pause life for a while, and for a few hours we did just that. We laughed without checking our phones, we danced like the world outside didn't exist. We spoke about silly things and avoided anything too deep or too serious because we all knew we needed that kind of night where nothing needed to be fixed. The hours passed quickly, like time was slipping between our fingers, and eventually people began to say their goodbyes in waves. Coats were picked up, hugs were exchanged, cars drove off into the dark and quiet. Settled in, I began gathering empty glasses, wiping off counters. Just absorbing that silence that comes right after noise when you suddenly notice the quiet. That's when I realized he was still there, still sitting on the edge of the couch, like he hadn't moved, like he belonged to the silence. More than the noise, he didn't say much, just looked at me in a way that made me feel like I didn't need to explain anything, like I didn't have to keep performing or smiling or making sure everyone else was okay. I asked him if he needed anything, maybe a ride or a glass of water, and he just smiled, that soft kind of smile that makes you stop for a second and remember your own name. He said no, and that he could stay a bit longer if that was all right with me. I could have said it wasn't. I could have said I was tired or that I needed to clean or rest. But instead I said sure, and something about the way I said it felt heavier than the word itself. We sat for a while without saying much, and honestly, it didn't feel awkward. It felt real. Like two people finally catching their breath after running for too long. We talked about things that weren't said during the party, the things you only say when everyone else is gone, when you're no longer trying to impress anyone, when you're not worried about how you're being perceived. He told me about how he's been feeling stuck lately, how everything feels like it's moving around him, but he can't seem to catch up. How he laughs with people but forgets the last time he really felt joy. And I listened, not because I had answers, but because I understood, because I'd been there, and maybe in some ways I still was. Then I shared too, not the polished version of my life that I usually present, but the truth, how sometimes I feel invisible in rooms filled with people, how I often smile because it's easier than explaining why I don't feel okay, how I carry a quiet loneliness even when I'm surrounded. And the more I spoke, the more I realized how much I needed someone to just hear me. He didn't interrupt, he didn't try to fix me, he just looked at me like my feelings mattered. And that was enough, more than enough, and slowly the space between us didn't feel so wide anymore. Our words became softer, our silences more meaningful, and there was this strange comfort in knowing we didn't need to rush or define anything. He stayed as the night grew deeper, as the clock lost its meaning. We didn't check the time. We didn't need to. We were somewhere between yesterday and tomorrow, and it felt like the most honest place we'd ever been. At some point, I brought out a blanket, not because it was cold, but because I wanted to create warmth, a kind of silent invitation to stay a little longer, and he understood. Without me having to explain, and we sat closer than before, not quite touching, but not far apart either, like we were orbiting something invisible and real. The living room lights were dim, the kind that makes you feel like you're safe, like you can say anything and it won't echo back with judgment. We talked about music, about dreams we forgot we had, about childhood memories that still live in quiet corners of our minds, about fears that wake us up and hopes that keep us going. He told me he hadn't felt this kind of peace in a long time, and I believed him because I hadn't either. It wasn't about romance, it wasn't about something dramatic or impulsive. It was about two people finding a pause in their chaos, a quiet understanding that sometimes what we need most is not to be alone with our thoughts. When the sun began to tease the edges of the sky, he finally stood up, not in a hurry. Just slowly, like he was waking up from something beautiful and unreal. He looked at me and said, "Thank you, not just for the night, but for the space, the silence, the listening." And I nodded, because words felt too small for what we had just experienced. He walked toward the door, paused for a second, and turned. back as if to remember the moment just a little longer. Then he left without saying goodbye, and somehow it felt right. Like some goodbyes are meant to be quiet and understood. I stood there for a moment after he left, taking in everything: the quiet room, the softness still lingering in the air, the feeling of being known even just for a night. And I knew that something had shifted in me, not loudly, not in a way the world could see, but in a way that mattered. Sometimes we let people stay, not because we planned to, not because we needed them to, but because something deep inside us recognizes something deep inside them. And for a brief moment, we get to feel less alone. He stayed after everyone left, and I let him, not because I was weak or longing or lonely, but because it felt right. And in a world that so often feels rushed and disconnected, that one choice that one night reminded me of what it feels like to be fully present with another soul, even now when the house is full and voices fill the space. I still remember that quiet night and the calm he brought with him, like he carried it in his pocket, just for me. And sometimes I wonder if he remembers it too, not just as a moment, but as a turning point. A soft chapter in both our stories that didn't need to be loud to be important. Because sometimes it's not about who stays the longest or who says the right things. It's about who stays after the noise fades and makes you feel seen in the silence. And maybe, just maybe, that's what we all crave: a moment where someone stays without needing a reason, and listens without trying to fix, and offers a presence so gentle it feels like healing. That night didn't change everything, but it changed something. It reminded me that connection doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it tiptoes in after the crowd is gone, sits beside you in your mess, and simply stays. He stayed after everyone left, and I let him. And if I'm honest, I'd let him again, even now, long after that night has faded into memory. There are moments when I catch myself replaying it, not like a movie, but like a feeling, a slow, quiet breath that reminds me of what it meant to be fully seen by someone without needing to explain or impress or wear any kind of mask. And in this world, where everything is shared, filtered, labeled, and rushed, there was something sacred about that unspoken understanding between us, something that didn't need to be documented or proven or even repeated. Some nights I walk into the same living room with the same furniture, the same walls, the same silence, and it feels different now, like that space remembers to, like the air still holds on to the softness of that moment. And I realize it wasn't just about him. It was about what he mirrored back to me, about who I became in that stillness, and what I allowed myself to feel and say and not hide from. Sometimes we don't know the impact of letting someone stay until long after they've gone. Sometimes it's not about whether they come back, but about the way their presence unlocked a part of us we didn't even know was locked away. And maybe that's why I never regretted it, not for a second, because what he gave me without even meaning to was permission to just be. And that kind of gift stays with you. He didn't promise anything. He didn't try to leave a mark or write a new chapter. He just arrived when the noise faded and stayed long enough for me to remember how human it feels to be listened to, and how healing it is to feel safe in silence. And sometimes that's all it takes: one evening, one person, one unscripted moment to shift something in your soul quietly, permanently. So if you ask me now if I would change anything about that night, I wouldn't, because that night wasn't about what happened or didn't happen. It was about what it revealed, what it softened, what it opened up inside me, and that is something no goodbye could ever take away. He stayed after everyone left, and I let him, and maybe that was the first time in a long time I let something real begin, without needing to know where it would end.